Welcome to another episode of the Backyard Backlog podcast. And before we jump into this installment, I just wanted to make a bit of an apology. I did want this episode to come out about a week earlier than it is, but unfortunately, we had a bit of a health scare. So, our cat Daisy got into some foreign objects and they ended up lodged in her stomach. And thankfully, I was home because I was sick, but she needed to be rushed to essentially what's a pet ER. And after the x rays, they found that they were in her stomach and not her intestines, which was good because if they were in her intestinal tract, she would have needed to have been cut open for them to remove them. However, this wasn't an easy 1, 2, 3 thing. They tried to induce vomiting on her, that didn't work. And eventually the doc came up to me and he said, well, we could go in with a scope, but there's so much food and fluid in her body that we don't know if we'll be able to get it. Otherwise, you'll have to get the surgery. And the surgery was $8,000. The scope was $5,000. That was on top of $1,000 that I was about to pay for a X-ray. Now, we ended up going with the scope. I asked him, what are the odds? He said, well, the intern I asked said they're about 80% sure they can get it out. And I said, okay. He said, but if we don't get it out, then you have to pay the $8,000 on top of the $5,000 on top of the $1,000. So it was a very stressful time, especially because we're at the point right now in our lives where we're expecting our firstborn child and we're trying to save as much money for that as possible. So currently, we really didn't have $5,000 or $8,000, excuse me, to just spend. So I ended up coming home. I was in tears most of the ride home. I tried to distract myself, and that's going to kind of be the focus of today's episode, is taking time for yourself, but we'll get there in a second. Stayed home, couldn't really take my mind off of things. Finally, a couple hours go by, we get a call from the vet, and she said, sorry, I was trying to remember. I talked to a lot of people that day. I was trying to remember who exactly I talked to. She said that they got everything out, and as long as Daisy, she's over there, that's why I'm pointing, she's on the windowsill. As long as Daisy didn't exhibit any unusual behaviors like vomiting or loss of appetite, as long as she went back to normal after the anesthesia wore off, she didn't need a follow-up, she didn't need any medication, she was fine. Knock on wood, she came home, she was a little loopy, a little hopped up, but she made it through the night, and the next morning she's fine, and now she's standing on my windowsill. Excuse me, I just don't know what I have today. It's probably the electrolytes. She's standing on the windowsill trying to catch bugs outside, but she can't. She doesn't know that, don't tell her. So, I know you can't. So we came home, everything's fine. But it was just a really stressful situation because one, Daisy's our first pet. And two, oh, she's clawing at the window because she wants the bugs. Daisy. Stop, mama. Two, like I said, we're expecting our first child and we want Daisy to be here for a long time. We want her to be in our kid's life. But we're all good. Everything's taken care of. So on to the topic at hand, which is taking time for yourself. You do not start biting on stuff. I see you back there. Taking time for yourself. And when we're kids, it's a very easy thing to do. We come home from school, we do our homework, we do our chores. Sorry, I hit the mic. She ran away. Okay. When we're kids and we're at school, it's a very easy thing for us to do because we go to school, whatever extracurricular activity, we come home and then we do our chores, our homework, eat, and then we kind of have the rest of the day and night to do whatever we want. And when we're on vacations or when we're on school breaks, we have even more free time for ourselves. As an adult, it's a little bit harder because we have just a little bit more responsibility to take care of, more so if you have a family or if you're like me and you work multiple jobs. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't take time for ourselves. Now, what does taking time for ourselves look like? It can look like many different things. What are you biting? Stop. She's biting everything today. You are just being a little stinker. Now, for some people, it could be going to the gym. For others, it could be cooking, going to the movies, watching Netflix. But if you're watching this podcast, it means that, like me, time for yourself is playing video games. And that's a great thing. We've talked earlier in the podcast and different episodes about how backlogs can be stressful and things of that nature. But what's important is just finding time. whatever time you have, that's 3 hours on a Saturday, and that's the only time you get a break from everything going on in your life. That's when you take the time to do those things. So, why did I bring up Daisy and her whole story? Because that's what happened in this past weekend. So, that whole event happened Wednesday. Thursday, I go to work. Friday, I go to work. Saturday, I go to work. Saturday night, we go grocery shopping. And then I come home. And I could have done things like force this episode out. I could have forced my Borderlands 2 retrospective out, which I didn't. It is out now, however. So if you want to watch that, I'll put it in a card up in the window. But I said to myself, you know what? I need a break. Mentally, I'm exhausted. And even my wife said it. And she's a great person in that regard, where she will tell me, honey, go sit down, go do this. You're stressed. You need to take time for yourself mentally, because she knows that I do all these things between work, 3 jobs, do this, make all these videos. And sometimes I don't take time for myself. So if you have someone in your life that can almost be a gauge of when you need a break, it's a really wonderful thing. Other times you have to be your own advocate. So Saturday night, I open up Discord, all my friends are sitting in there, and I hop in, and my best friend sat there and he said, "Are you going to finally beat Baldur's Gate?" Now, he loves this game to death. I've been playing it on and off since about January, and I've enjoyed it, but I wasn't obsessed with it. So I log in, boot it up, put a stream into Discord, and we start going through the rest of Act 3. And I was having a good time. We ended up fighting the Raphael boss, and then we ended up trying to fight Cazador. At this point, we'd been playing for about 2 to 3 hours, and it was almost midnight. So, excuse me, I need some needed some water. So at this point, I said, you know what? Cazador was giving me the hands. I wasn't having it. I logged off. I said, screw this game. I go to bed. I take my time, sleep. I get up in the morning, feed her, go to the grocery store. And as I'm leaving the store rather, I text my best friend. I said, get in Discord. I'm beating Baldur's Gate 3. And he said, I don't know if you're doing all that. We'll see. He goes, Cazador was kind of running you. And I said, yeah, don't worry about that. So we get in Discord, and I proceeded to spend roughly 13 hours playing this game. I did take breaks to help my wife with laundry, to make myself some food, to go for some walks. But all in all, it was right around maybe anywhere between 10 and 13 hours that I was in this chair, looking at this screen, playing Baldur's Gate 3. And in the beginning, Cazador was giving me a little trepidation, and my best friend had given me some tips. And then he said, you know what? I'd reload the fight. And I said, no, we beat Cazador. And from that point on, we didn't really hit a roadblock until we fought the Orin boss. But I did the Cazador fight, the Steel Watch Foundry, Orin, Gortash, and then fought the Netherbrain. The Netherbrain took 2 tries because I was just trying to get placement and do all of these things. And it was a great time. And I beat Baldur's Gate 3, watched all the epilogues, went to the little camp party afterwards, and then I uninstalled it. And I went to work the next day feeling better because I took that time for myself. And now, because I did that instead of forcing things out, I was able to come home from work Monday, work on the Borderlands video refreshed, revitalized, which I think made it a better product and a better piece of content. And now I'm able to do this on Sunday, where I can take my time and record for you guys without feeling like I have to or not being in the right headspace. And that's not always the case. Sometimes you're just going to have to do the thing, and that's fine. But most times it's better to take a step back and recalibrate yourself in a sense, and then proceed forward with whatever you have on hand. So now that was Baldur's Gate, but there are plenty other games that I could have played in that moment that might have made a difference. I could have played Kingdom Hearts 2 again, which is my go-to comfort game, but it's not so much what game you played, it's more so just playing the game. And that's the important part, because when you don't take time for yourself in any situation, you start running yourself ragged, you start wearing yourself out, you start going a little too thin, and it can have an effect on your mental health, on your emotional health, your spiritual health, your relationships. If I don't take time for myself, my wife and I start to quip and bicker a little bit more, and it's just not a good time, all things considered. So that's why that's important. Now, the second part of today's episode is I wanted to talk about Baldur's Gate 3 because I wanted to give my review of Baldur's Gate and what I thought about it overall. Now, I didn't record this, so it's not going to be a big official review. And I think that's one thing I'm going to do with the podcast specifically going forward is that I'm going to do these little review episodes when I beat games and check them off my backlog. Another game I beat actually yesterday was not beat because it doesn't really have an end, was Balatro, however Ben Starr wants us to say it. But I downloaded it because it was free and I didn't think it was going to be as addicting as it was. But there was just something about it. There was some itch, something that just made me keep wanting to come back. And finally, I kept playing until I did my first full 8 ante run, and I did it. And then I said, you know what? I will lose so much time and so much sleep to this game if I don't just uninstall it. So I accomplished what I wanted to and uninstall it. And sometimes when you have big games like that or live service games, that's the best thing you can do. You can accomplish what you wanted to, and you can just uninstall it. Give me 1 second because I hear her in there doing something, and I want to make sure she's not getting into something she's not supposed to. So that was Balatro. Finished it up. It was a fun time. Baldur's Gate 3. Overall, I'd say Baldur's Gate 3, for me, is a 9 out of 10. And there's a couple reasons why. First off, that's the saying, right, brain? Thanks, brain. First off, I think the pacing is a little bit not skewed. I'm trying to find the right word. The pacing isn't perfect. Act 1 is relatively long, which it should be. It's the setup to the game. Act 2 in comparison is relatively short, and Act 3 is once again longer than Act 2, maybe longer than Act 1. And when I brought this up to my friend, he said, well, what do you expect? That's when all the character arcs and everything gets tied up. And I understand that. But I almost would have preferred if it was split differently. And one of the things I mentioned was how in Act 3, you fight 2 of the cult members, or in Act 2, you only fight the one. Personally, and again, this is all subjective and up to preference, I would have preferred it if you went and fought one of the cult members per act, and you capstone Act 1 with the big discovery of the cult, and then Act 2 you go and you fight, Merkel or whatever his name is, and then Act 3 you fight the last one. And I think the way it could have been set up, personally, I mean, you'd have to change a lot of the story to get this to work, but the weakest out of the 3 cultists was Gortash. And the strongest one was Ketheric in terms of the buildup and the lore and everything that made it exciting. And then Orin was kind of there. It's hard to separate Gortash from the city of Baldur's Gate, but I feel that splitting the 3 cultists up evenly across the acts would have been better. Or if you do have the Gortash and Orin fight in Act 3, you have them separate, because you can do them any way you want, and that's, I guess, the freedom of an RPG. But I ended up fighting them one after another. I fought Gortash and then immediately went underground and fought Orin, and then fought the Netherbrain. So that was the first thing. The other thing about Baldur's Gate that I find not bad, and I understand that it's supposed to be D&D and it's supposed to be a true go out there and figure it out, and this could be a product of me playing a lot of other earlier Western RPGs like Skyrim and Fallout and The Witcher, but it did feel a bit slow, just in general. And I'm not saying I want a super sprint button, but just the movement speed felt slow to the point where I was using fast travel as much as I could. And I understand wanting your character and your players to really explore the world and really get out there and do that type of thing. But it was one of those things where I just wish it was just a little bit faster. The encounters were okay. Some of them were fun. Some of them were a slog. Act 2 was interesting because of the shadow mechanic and how you get through the whole area. There's a lot in that area that I feel I haven't seen and I haven't gotten to explore because there was a real push to get you to the tower, to Kethric's tower, to fight Kethric. Whereas Act 1, you're kind of all there, all about on the coast. And then Act 3, you're really just exploring the city and doing everything for everyone. Where in Act 2, it seems very, very tunnel visioned, where you have to get Kethric, you have to go to the tower, you have to assault him and do the stuff. And I think that could be why I feel the pacing's off, is because of how tunneled Act 2 is compared to Act 1 and Act 3. But other than that, voice acting was really solid. I found Nolan North at the end of the game, and I was kind of shocked he was in there. The companions, if I didn't have my best friend telling me to go and do certain things, I would have missed a lot of companions. I almost missed Gale entirely. And my best friend had to say, turn around and go back, because if you don't get this companion, the game ends. I said, what do you mean? And he said, if you don't get Gale, the game ends. You can't progress. Which is weird to me because, well, if you're going to make an RPG where players can do everything, right? Why would I have to rush to get Gale? If I wanted to miss a companion, that shouldn't affect. Oh man, the white balance was off. Hold on, let me turn this. Okay, that's a little bit better because the sun is just coming in over here hard. So if I wanted to miss a companion, that should maybe lock me out of some things, maybe some side quests, maybe an ending or two, but that shouldn't break the whole game. And I did find that weird because a lot of the characters I got, I didn't take out of camp. My party consisted of Astarion, Shadowheart, and Gale. Which, yeah, I put Lae'zel in camp right away. And once my friend told me, oh, it doesn't matter who you bring out into the world because all the other characters' story quests progress anyway, I never changed my party. I didn't find a reason to change my party. Even to the end when I got the quest from Duke Ravengard to go find the dragon and he wanted Will to do it, I asked my friend, oh, I should bring Will, right? He goes, no. There's a quest where Karlach wants to meet Gortash, and I said, oh, I got to bring Karlach to Gortash. And he goes, no, you could just bring her to his body. And this could be because of playing Mass Effect. When you had companion quests, you had to bring the companion. That was the whole focus. And I liked that because it made me care about the crew of the Normandy a little bit more, constantly going in, talking to them and checking on them. The only time I talked to half of the cast in Baldur's Gate 3 was when there was an exclamation mark above their head in camp. Otherwise, I didn't talk to anybody. I just romanced Shadowheart and went on my merry way. But I understand why people love this game, and I understand why it gets the ratings that it gets, and it gets the praise that it gets, because it really is a fantastic game, front to back. I don't think there was a part that I hated. There were annoying fights. I think the Cazador fight is absolutely atrocious, especially when compared to other fights like Raphael, which Raphael's fight was fantastic. But fights like Gortash is a walk in the park, especially if you save him for the end and you do all the other quests and wrap them all up. Again, I didn't do every quest. I didn't do everything in the game. There was a quest I picked up in Act 1 to bring a chest to somebody, like a full treasure chest. And the marker disappeared. There was another quest where I had to steal an egg and I could give it to Lae'zel. Nothing happened of that. Not even in the epilogue. And that kind of bummed me out because I went through all of the trouble of passing speech checks and stealth checks and all this stuff to get the egg, and I could have sold it to someone who was going to give me a reward right then and there, and Lae'zel made a big fuss, and the game hints that you should give it to her, and even my best friend was like, yeah, give Lae'zel the egg, and I gave her the egg. Nothing happened. Nothing came of it. And that was kind of a bummer, because I'd expect that there would be some sort of payoff. So my biggest problem with Baldur's Gate overall is that at points it can be inconsistent. And that took away from the enjoyment of the game more than anything. Again, there's really high points. The voice acting's really good. I thought I was going to hate Astarion by the end of the game. He was one of my favorite characters. What was the other? Ketheric. Ketheric was another great point I've brought up before. Karlach's really fun. Gale can be fun by Act 3 because his story starts to really build and flesh out. I really did enjoy Shadowheart's story. But there were moments that I just kind of went, why? But all things considered, Baldur's Gate 3 is a fantastic game. I'd give it, like I said, a 9, maybe a 9.5 out of 10. And I know everyone else gives it perfect scores across the board. I understand why it won Game of the Year. It should have, rightfully so. But now that it's over, I'm excited to go and play a bunch of other stuff. That's one more game off the backlog, and a pretty big one, mind you. That took about 80 hours of a playthrough, all things considered, and I've been going since January, so I finished it last week. So we're thinking, what, January, February, March, April, May, 6 months? I'm looking at the date on my computer, and I saw that it said 6, and I don't know why my brain didn't just comprehend that it was 6 months. It's because I haven't eaten. I'm recording this at 9 in the morning after I just went for my walk. But that's the importance of taking time for yourself, because you'll find when you do, you end up getting more things done. If I go on any further, I'm just going to go off and ramble, and I don't want to do that. So we're going to call it here. Great episode. I really enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, let me know. I usually don't say that. I stopped that a while ago when I started doing YouTube, but I do hope you enjoyed it. I've got some new artwork for the podcast coming that my sister's making. It looks really cool so far, and I can't wait to show that to you guys. In other news, Borderlands 2, the retrospective video is out now. Borderlands 3, the retrospective video is in the works, and I'll see you when I see you. Until then, always remember, it's all about having fun.